On a morning when everything was already going wrong, Amelia Grant made a decision she would spend the rest of the day regretting, not because it was the wrong decision, but because it forced her to confront something she had spent years refusing to see. Her private driver had called in sick at 6:45 in the morning, 45 minutes before she was supposed to be in a boardroom across the city finalizing the most important investment deal of her career. The backup service her assistant Sophia had arranged fell through. The rideshare estimate was 22 minutes, and she needed to be moving in 5. So she did what she never did. She opened a last-minute gig driver app, accepted the first available profile, and told herself it was just a car ride. Just a stranger behind a wheel. Just a means to an end. The man who pulled up to the curb outside her building 3 minutes later drove a clean but aging sedan, wore a faded button-down shirt pressed neatly at the collar, and had the quiet, unhurried manner of someone who had long since stopped needing to impress anyone. His name, according to the app, was Caleb Turner. He was 28 years old. He worked multiple gigs. And to Amelia Grant, in that first 30 seconds, he was invisible. What she should have done, though, she would not understand this until much later, was look more carefully. Caleb Turner had not always driven strangers across the city for hourly pay. There had been a version of him that wore a badge to a different kind of building, that sat in rooms where the decisions being made were architectural in scale, where the systems he designed moved hundreds of millions of dollars in goods across continents with frictionless precision. He had been, before the last 3 years, unraveled everything he thought he knew about his own life. A senior systems engineer at one of the country's most respected logistics infrastructure firms. He had built routing algorithms that were still in use today. He had consulted on cold chain protocols for clients whose names appeared on the sides of trucks nationwide. He had once delivered a presentation to a room of 14 senior executives that ended with a standing ovation, which he had found embarrassing, because the work spoke for itself and didn't need applause. He had been, by every professional metric, exceptional. And then his wife left. And his daughter, Ella, was 6 years old, and frightened, and needed him present in a way that a corner office and a 100-hour work week could not allow. So he walked away. Not with bitterness. Caleb Turner was not a bitter man, but with the quiet, deliberate intention of someone who had decided that one thing mattered more than everything else combined. Ella mattered. The rest was negotiable. She was small for her age, with dark eyes that noticed everything, and a stuffed rabbit named Chester that had survived every relocation, every hard week, every night she fell asleep waiting for her father to come home from his last shift. She was the first thing Caleb thought about every morning, and the last thing he checked on every night, a small breathing proof that he had made the right choice, even on the days when the right choice felt impossible to sustain. He had never complained about the gigs. He drove when he needed to drive. He delivered when he needed to deliver. He did what had to be done without announcing it, because that was the only way he knew how to live. And on mornings like this one, when he pulled up to the curb outside a glass tower building, and a young woman in a tailored coat climbed into his back seat without looking at him, he simply put the car in drive and did his job. He had read somewhere, years ago, that the most dangerous form of ignorance is the kind that doesn't know it's ignorance, the kind that wears confidence, so naturally it never thinks to question itself. He had thought about that a lot in the years since leaving Vantis. Not with resentment, just with the particular clarity that comes from choosing invisibility voluntarily, from watching how the visible world moves and what it overlooks. He had learned more about systems, about the assumptions baked into them, the gaps that accumulate in the margins from 3 years of gig work than from 4 years behind a corporate badge. The people who ran the world's logistics networks largely did not talk to the people who moved through them. That gap was a design flaw no algorithm had ever addressed. None of the rest of it was visible from the outside. Nothing he had been was visible. That was fine with him. Amelia Grant had built her company from the inside out. She had taken over Meridian Logistics Group at 24, the youngest CEO in its history after the board, facing a series of operational failures and a shrinking client base, decided that someone who understood systems better than politics might be exactly what the company needed. She had proven them right, and then some. In 2 years, she had restructured 3 divisions, cut waste by 31%, and secured a pipeline of new contracts that tripled the company's projected revenue. She was sharp, relentless, and almost always right about the big things. She was, in some of the smaller things, less careful. She judged quickly. She categorized people fast asset or friction, relevant or ignorable, And once a category was assigned, she rarely revisited it. It was efficient. And efficiency was the principle she had organized her entire professional life around. The men and women who moved through her orbit knew this about her. Some found it clarifying. Others found it quietly dehumanizing. Sophia, her assistant, had learned to work around it with practiced diplomacy, inserting small corrections into the margins of Amelia's assumptions whenever she could. Caleb Turner, pulling smoothly into morning traffic, had been filed immediately under irrelevant. He did not react to being filed. He set the navigation, checked his mirrors, and said nothing. The city moved around them in its usual compressed urgency buses cutting lanes, delivery vans double-parked at intersections, cyclists threading the gaps with reckless confidence. Caleb drove without tension, reading the traffic the way someone reads a familiar text, making small adjustments before they became necessary. He took a left where the navigation said straight, cutting through a residential block that shaved 4 minutes off the route without explanation. Amelia did not notice. She was deep in her phone call, her voice low and controlled, one hand pressed to the window as the buildings blurred past. On the seat beside her, the printed contracts fanned out across the leather pages of figures and clauses she had reviewed the night before. And the night before that, and was still reviewing now, in a car driven by a man whose name she had already forgotten. The deal with Dominic Hayes represented something larger than money. It represented proof that Meridian's northern expansion was viable, that the operational model she had redesigned from the ground up could hold under the weight of real growth. If Hayes walked, it wasn't just the capital that disappeared. It was the narrative, the next 6 months of investor confidence, the momentum she had spent 2 years building. She could not afford to lose it. Not this deal. Not this quarter. Not with the board watching every move she made with the careful attention of people waiting to be either vindicated or alarmed. Caleb, for his part, said nothing during the first stretch of the drive. He listened, the way someone listens when the information arriving is already fitting itself into patterns. He recognizes the cadence of a deal under stress, the particular anxiety of a CEO trying to hold together something that wants to come apart. He had heard versions of these conversations before, in other contexts, from the other side of the table. He said nothing about any of it. He drove. "Which northern route is Hayes questioning?" Caleb asked quietly when she ended her call. His voice was unhurried, as though the question had been waiting for a natural opening rather than forcing one. She looked up from her phone for the first time since she had gotten in the car. She looked at him the way you look at a piece of furniture that has unexpectedly spoken. "Excuse me? The northern route, the one your partner is questioning. Is it the corridor through the Hartwell distribution hub, or the cutoff that bypasses it?" "That is not your concern," Amelia said, and returned to her phone. Caleb said nothing more. He turned onto the overpass, and the morning skyline opened up to the right glassy towers reflecting a colorless sky, and he drove. A few minutes later, a delivery truck lurched out of a side street without signaling. In a single, smooth motion, no brake screech, no jerk. Caleb had already moved the car laterally, clearing the gap before the truck had fully committed to its error. The whole thing took perhaps a second and a half. Amelia felt none of the usual lurch of near-miss adrenaline. When she looked up, the truck was behind them, already small in the mirror. She looked at the back of Caleb's head for a moment before looking away. His hands were steady on the wheel, his shoulders had not changed. He had not said anything about it, no sharp intake of breath.